You don't have a script that you're going by?
No, this is all. This is all. This is by the by.
Okay.
I guess we'll start at the beginning.
The beginning.
No. Wait.
Where were you born, Gene?
At home.
At home?
I was born at home.
I did not know that.
All my brothers and sisters were born at home.
I don't know. That's off my guess.
Albany. So that I guess there was no record of it, and I had to go around and get signed affidavits from several people who knew me and knew when I was born.
Oh, God.
That sounds kind of fishy, though.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
does.
and then that's how I came up with the birth certificate.
But the doctor that delivered me had passed away, and but the midwife was still living, and we had to go back and get her to sign forms because she came to the house and helped.
How did you guys meet? How did you ever get together? How was that possible?
I was home from Christmas vacation from University of Kentucky, and sitting on the street that goes through Burkesville in front of Houchins, sitting on the car and saw her drive by, and I asked my buddy who it was, and he told me, and later on I got to follow her, and as she's turning around at the stock market, stockyards at the end of town, I pulled up beside her and said, "Oh, how you doing?" And she rolled down her window and, "Oh, you're not the person I thought you were," and drove off. And then the next day, I saw her at what was that, Dairy Queen up there, or used to be at Tasty Freeze. I saw her ordering something at Tasty Freeze, and I pulled in and started talking to her and asked for a date. But she didn't want to go with me, so she set me up with her girlfriend. And I went out with her girlfriend, and I had a second date with her girlfriend, but she stood me up.
And he came back to my
So
house.
I went to her house, and we had a date.
So it
Got
was
started
good
there.
she stood him up, I guess.
And
I
then
felt sorry for him.
Yeah.
I felt sorry for him, and I said, "Oh, I hate that she stood you up." And then I found out she had a date with somebody else. So,
Her date got there before I did.
so I told him I would go out with him.
And we went out.
Do you remember where we went?
Yeah, I do. We went to a movie in Glasgow, Kentucky.
You do remember. What did we see?
Something about a dog.
It was
Some kind of big
shaggy
dog or
some kind
something.
of- yeah.
But set up another date for 2 or 3 weeks. I went back to school and came back. We had a date in February. We spent a lot of time on the phone. And that was before, you had these phones where you call all the time, one set fee. You had to put quarters in the
And I had a party line. So when I was talking to him, everybody was listening. It was
But we
something
talked a lot
else.
on the phone and wrote letters. And on the second date, on the way to Livingston to go to a movie, we were talking, and all this time I think, well, she's got the same ethics I've got. She's got the same beliefs I have. She sees the world the same way as I do, and this could be the girl. And it just kind of came out that I think I'm going to marry you on the second date. And she said, "What did you say?" Now she thinks I'm an idiot. So I'm embarrassed. But
I was shocked.
in another month we were engaged, in another month we were married. And that was 46 years ago last June.
So you dated how long before?
6
dated-
months total.
Well, it was 6 months from January to June, but we only had like maybe 4 dates, live dates,
But we
Because I
had
was in
letters
school.
almost every day back and forth.
because I was in school and we just did a lot of talking on the phone, writing a lot of letters. But as far as dates together, it wasn't 4 or 5 dates
But he wrote letters while he was working.
while I was working. Well, I was night watchman, so you sit around and had to have something to do, so I wrote letters. But
And we still
Anyway.
have the letters. We just reread some of them.
oh no.
We found them in the attic when we cleaned the attic out. He used to be really mushy.
So what about the proposal? Any story about that?
Yeah, we got a disagreement on that. But we got a disagreement on my proposal. But we went to, I took her down to, was it Swinging Bridge on Del Hollow Lake, at that little park down there. And I say I drove into the park and turned to the left and faced the lake on that side. She says I turned
went to
into
the
the park and turned to the right and faced the lake that way.
Because we were facing the dam.
Okay. But anyway, I had bought a ring and proposed to her. And she wasn't sure she was going to say yes or not because she thought it was a pre-engagement ring. That's how small it was. But she did, and we were married.
Yes, when I realized what it was.
Oh, so he's not joking.
He's not joking. He's not joking.
But it was the first engagement ring I bought. Actually, it's the last engagement ring I bought too.
But I bet you want to talk about the next ring you bought her?
She bought the next ring.
I bought the next ring. I picked it out, but you bought it.
And she picked it out, but his a little bigger.
Where'd you get married at? Any
Uh,
memories about the day you got married?
all kinds of memories.
Oh, what a day.
Oh, what a day, yeah. We got married in Tennessee, Salina, Tennessee, except
It ended up being all Cumberland County, Kentucky.
church, the address, even though it was Salina, Tennessee, the church is actually located in Kentucky. And we got our blood test and license in Salina, Tennessee. 2 days before the wedding, the preacher called her and said, I don't think that's going to be legal because your license say Tennessee, but the church is in Kentucky. So that won't be legal. So we went ahead and went through the ceremony at the church that's located in Kentucky, got in the station wagon with the photographer, the preacher, the witness, and Gene and I, and drove down 200 yards to the Tennessee state line and went through it again.
Yeah, we went to Effingham, Illinois, and I'd never been anywhere. I mean, I had never seen the world. I'd been in Salina, Tennessee. And he had a job. As soon as he got out of school, they had a job going to Illinois, Effingham. So I packed up everything I had. I owned a car, and I had a little checking account. He had nothing. He had a company car.
Yeah, I had a company
and a great
car.
job. So we took off with.
Loaded everything in a little U-Haul van, all of my stuff and her stuff, and went to Effingham, got a 2-bedroom apartment.
We were there for 6 months.
We lived and we moved into the apartment. I said, we need to have us a house built in 6 months. So that's the first thing we started working on was getting a house built. And we lived in the apartment for 6 months. And we ended up staying an extra 2 months. We'd signed a lease for 6 months. We ended up staying an extra 2 while the house was being built. Tisha was born after about 3 years later after we got married. And we were in Effingham 4 years. And from Effingham, Illinois, we moved to Mankato, Minnesota, job transfer. And Chris was born there. And he was born 2 years after we moved to Minnesota.
When Tish was born, Dave was there. But I worked at a clinic with the doctors, and I remember I had a little Corvette. And when I would go to work, the doctor and I would get there at the same time, and he would have to help me out of the car. He would literally pull me out of the Corvette. So he was really sweet, but he delivered Tish. But when Chris was born, Dave was gone.
I made it there.
He had missed a trip the week before, a company big trip, and he didn't go because he thought I might deliver. Well, he didn't go, and then as the week went by, he went out for the day someplace far away. I don't remember, but he was coming back that night. But I took Tish to the park, and I was swinging her, and all at once my water broke. And we had walked several blocks to the park. So here I'm trying to get her and go back home. So I had to get ready none of my neighbors were home, so I had to take Tish to the hospital with me. Had to carry my suitcase down the steps, drive myself to the hospital. And eventually a neighbor came and got Tish. But he didn't make it there before Chris was born.
I made it there in time to see him pop out.
Just barely.
Yep.
Just barely.
From Mankato, we spent 2 years in Mankato, and man, it was cold. 2 years is all we could take. But
Remember the time that you almost died? We went out?
that was in Chicago.
Oh, I thought it was Minnesota.
No, it's Chicago.
Are you sure?
I'm positive. But anyway, spent 2 years in Mankato, and then we moved, another transfer to Western Kentucky, around Paducah, Kentucky. But it's Draffendale was the actual name, just a little small town. But we spent, 4 years there. And then we went to Chicago. And we had 5 years in Chicago. But it was cold in Minnesota, but it was also cold in Chicago. That one night, it was like 40 degrees below zero with wind blowing, with the wind chill factor around 90 below. And for some stupid reason, we were out in the car.
We were told not to be out. Nobody was supposed to be out. Conditions were bad.
But we were going to the grocery store, went and got something, and on the way back to the house, and the car died. It's about a quarter of a mile, maybe a little bit more than a quarter of a mile from the house. So I thought, well, I'll just walk to the house and get the other car and come back and get the kids and Jean.
Not a
And,
good idea.
And I was all bundled up, but I started walking. And I got to feel, hey, this is not too bad. I thought it was going to really be cold. And just feeling real good, not feeling cold at all. And then, but then I got saying, I'm getting really tired. I need to sit down and rest. And so I was just about ready to sit down on the side of the railroad track, sit down to rest. Not even thinking about, I've only walked 100 yards. I shouldn't be tired, but I was just really tired and I just needed some rest. And about the time I sat down, a lady came by in a car and picked me up. And I got in the car, and then I started getting warmed up and thawing out. I don't know if you've ever had your fingers get cold or freeze or get real cold, or your toes, and then when they start thawing out, they hurt. I hurt from my head to my toes that way. And then it's when I realized I was about froze to death. If she hadn't come by, I would have froze right there on that railroad track. But anyway, she picked me up, took me back to the house. I got the other car, went back and got them. When I got back, the police were sitting with her.
Everybody was out searching for him and they couldn't find him.
And they had called the police and they were looking for me. Of course, I'd been
Well,
picked
no,
up.
we didn't call. They just came by because we were sitting there. And they put us in the police car to get warm because, of course, we were cold. And we were in the police car, and he kept coming back, and he says, nobody's seen him. We're searching. They've got all these people out searching and couldn't find him. So it was a horrible night.
Then I showed up
And he showed up.
and picked him up, took him home. But
So from
anyway,
then on, we didn't get out when we weren't supposed to. But when we lived, we used to have to plug our cars in. It was so cold. You would have to plug your cars in at night or they wouldn't start the next morning. So it was a different type place to live.
when I was in college, my senior year, in December, there was a job fair at the University of Kentucky, and I attended it and did an interview and got the job in the fall. So when I graduated in May, I already had the job lined up. But anyway, it was an agriculture job. We helped, I was a manufacturing representative, what they call them. Manufacturer technical representative was the exact title. But what it was is we went around, we held meetings and teaching farmers about how to use chemicals, what types of chemicals to use, things like that. And that's what my whole career in the corporate world was involved in that. But I went from being a representative to a district manager to a regional manager. That's what I was when I was in Chicago. I was regional manager for the mid-1/3 of the United States.
I worked in the medical field for several years. I worked for doctors to start out with, and then I went to an ophthalmologist, and I've worked for him. In Paducah, that's where I worked.
It was in Chicago. That's where I was regional manager in Chicago. And in Chicago is where they were trying to, after 5 years, they were wanting me to move to Philadelphia. And I wasn't going to go to Philadelphia because in Chicago, my job, I was going to Philadelphia at least once a month on trips. And I knew I didn't want to live there. And after about a year and a half of them asking me to go to Philadelphia, I decided to just resign, and that's when we moved to Nashville here and started our own business.
But all during his job, he traveled a lot. There were times when he was gone 5 days a week. So he was catching a plane and going places all the time. So he was on the road a lot. So we were getting tired of that too.
Working for a big corporation was financially secure, and may have ended up better than what we did, but I don't regret anything I did as far as just trying to do it on my own, because when you're working for somebody else, you always think about working for yourself. And so after a while, we decided to take the chance, and it was scary.
It was very
It was
scary.
very scary, but ended up working out very well.
We decided we didn't want the kids to grow up north too. We wanted to bring them back to more to the south to grow up. Things were just different up there. She was. They did well. Tisha was an excellent student everywhere she went. She was just, but they didn't want to leave Chicago because they had their friends, but then when we finally got them here, they loved it here. They thrived, but they did fine. I mean, and when you have kids, when you move a lot, you fit right in, because as soon as they get into a system, they meet other kids and you meet their parents. So moving wasn't hard at all. In fact, I kind of enjoyed
Meeting new people.
meeting
making
new people
friends.
and going places. It was neat.
And we talked about Minnesota being cold, and it was, but the people in Minnesota,
They were wonderful.
it was fantastic, because everybody depended on everybody, and it made friends real fast, and everybody took care of everyone.
The neighbors would call and say, "Hey, I put on a pot of soup. You guys want to come over and eat?" I mean, it was just real close knit.
And we take trips and go. There's 2 or 3 people in each place that we got that we still talk to, and we visit them, and they've come and visited us. We'll take them around Nashville, show them the town.
We had friends from Ohio last year came to
Yeah.
Nashville just to see us. They had a ball.
But we never were
They
living.
lived in Effingham with us, and they moved because our group of people were always moving around, our friends. So we have friends scattered all over.
Well, we moved from Chicago to Nashville, well, the Nashville area, the Old Hickory, where it was. We lived. Our office was
What
in
year was that?
Nashville, but that was 1989, December 1989, and then we started the business in 90.
But I came first. He's had to hold his job till we could get our insurance and everything situated. So I came and we started the company. And I remember he kept saying, "Oh, it'll be fine," because I didn't know my way around downtown. He said, "It'll be fine. Everybody will come to you. You know, we'll just advertise and set up slow and they'll all come to you." First client that called wanted me to come to him. And he was saying, "Well, you go through this back alley and you take this street." And I prayed that night. I thought, please let me find this guy. But I found him and we got him as a client. So it worked out, but it was scary, very scary.
It was a mailing and packaging service.
It was called Advanced Mail Concepts. And I had worked for a company in Chicago that was similar to it. So that's one reason we started it. But it was a great company. It just kept growing and growing.
And you lived here for 25 years, and now you're moving.
Well, this place, we lived in Old Hickory for 5 years, getting the business started. And after we got it going pretty good, she started looking for a house on the lake. And she was on the way to see a house on the lake when she saw this place and came here. And she was by herself. I had no interest in moving. But then she liked it, and then she came home and got me and Tish and Chris. And we came out here, looked at it, and as soon as we saw it, we all fell in.
They all loved it. The kids saw the pool and they said, "This is the one, Mom."
And so now we've been at this place for 25 years. And when we first moved here, there's only about a half acre here that's being mowed. Everything else was grown up. You couldn't even walk through it. We moved from Old Hickory to Mount Juliet. And the reason we moved from Old Hickory, another reason we like moving out here, because it was out in the country. I mean, this was really out in the country then.
There was nothing.
And Old Hickory was crowded, a lot of traffic, and a subdivision, and your next door neighbor was 18 feet away from you. And but we loved it. The road from Old Hickory to here was just a 2-lane highway, but now it's a 5-lane highway. And Mount Juliet has gone from like 5,000 people to like 45,000 people in the last 10 years.
The only
So now
grocery
it's really-
store was a Piggly Wiggly, and they had hardly anything. So we drove back to Hermitage to get groceries. I mean, Mount Juliet was nothing hardly at all.
And now we've got 2 Krogers, 2 Publix, and Walmart.
We have a huge mall that people come from all over here. There's all kinds of restaurants. It's just booming. And Amazon is moving their headquarters to Mount Juliet, so that's even going to be more booming.
And so we've sold the place and going to a condo, let somebody else mow the grass, take care of the pool.
But anyway, the condo is on the lake, so we'll have a lake view and trees that we can still look out on, because I'm going to miss this view. I love to sit on my porch.
And her lake view is what she was looking for when we moved here
So,
25 years ago.
oh, we've had a lot of people visit us here. We've had a lot of our family parties here, so it's been a great place to raise the kids and to be. Grandkids have loved it here with the go-karts and.
Yeah, the grandkids are going to shoot us, so I mean,
Yeah, they're not happy.
they're not happy at all.
Yeah, we'll have a pool in our other neighborhood too, a pool and a tennis courts, and it's gated, so it'll be nice, but we won't have all this land. Yeah, Tisha got married here. In fact, they just had their 21st anniversary.
Day before yesterday.
So about this time of the year, and it turned out to be a beautiful day because we were so concerned. She got married in the front yard, and then we had a tent set up back here and had the reception back here and food on the pool, and just a beautiful day. So she's got a lot of good memories here.
Chris got married and Tisha, well, both of them got married the same year.
That same year, we sold our business, retired, took some time off, and we traveled. We went to Alaska for our 25th. That was our 25th anniversary.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. When we went to Hawaii, Chris was, he was a senior, and he just met a girl in school, and he didn't want to go because he didn't want to be gone for a week. He said, I've seen Florida, I don't need to go to Hawaii. But we kind of insisted that he go with us. And we hadn't been in Florida, we hadn't been in Hawaii an hour. He said, man, I'm glad you made me come because this is nothing like Florida.
Yeah, he loved it. They both did. It was a good trip. That was one thing, though, we did get to travel a lot when we were younger. With Dave's job, they would take us on trips, and he even took a small plane full of his clients one time, and we went to Puerto Rico.
That was when Tish was 6 weeks old.
Yeah, Tish was just tiny. So we have got to travel a lot, and it was neat. But then one time, when we hadn't been married that long, we were going to the grocery store to get groceries, and Dave said, we should just take off and go someplace. And I said, yeah, where would we go? And he said, well, let's go to California. And that's when we were living in Effingham.
We was married a year and a half.
Yeah.
We didn't have any kids. So you can get up and go anytime you don't have kids. But
He said, I can take off a week from work. Let's just get some groceries and we'll camp as we go out to California. And we did. We left, was it the next morning?
we left the next morning. Instead of buying hamburgers and stuff you'd normally buy, beans or whatever, we bought beanie weenies. And
So was that a good idea?
It was. We had a blast.
It was a great experience.
But he's known for taking shortcuts. And this one
Don't
day,
tell that one.
This one day we were taking a shortcut, and he kept saying, I know this road should meet up with this other road.
The map said it does.
So we started out, it was a nice road. It just kept getting worse and worse. And then it turned to gravel. And then the next thing you know, it's just a path with these big old rocks. And he hit the.
We lacked about 2 miles of being to the next highway where the map showed it going to, but there was a sign that says, "Road not maintained for public use."
And we didn't make it. He hit a rock.
I thought, well, we can still make it, but hit a rock and bent the dustpan. I don't know if you've ever bent the dustpan up against the flywheel on a.
The
on a
noise
car,
was
but it is-
horrible.
It's not really causing any damage, but the noise is horrendous. But we turned around. I tried to get her to.
He wanted to
camp
stay right there. He said, "Let's
I
just camp
I
here."
just wanted to camp there and fix it the next morning.
And I looked out, and there's this rabbit that's sitting this tall outside the car. I've
Well,
never
I don't
seen
know if it's
anything
that
like
big.
it in my life.
Big jackrabbit. This was in Arizona.
It was on an Indian reservation, we found out later. We were on an Indian reservation that we shouldn't have been on anyway. It was huge. Oh, that was the top of its ears. Its ears were standing up.
Looked like a dog with mule ears.
Thought of it.
She tells me about my shortcuts all the time.
Yeah, he has a tendency to take shortcuts, and we usually have an adventure on his shortcuts. So I can imagine what we're going to do in this motorhome. We're going to have some adventures. We are buying a motorhome. We're picking it up.
I promise I won't take any shortcuts in it
Okay,
because
then.
you can't turn around in it.
No, when everything is settled here, we're going to take off on another trip. So should be fun. We don't know. We're just going to go.
Airplane pilot.
Yes, we had a small plane
That was fun.
that was in Effingham.
Fly around different places, have lunch, fly back home.
It was
It was-
nice.
it
You
was
could
a lot
go
of
to
fun.
another state and have dinner, and we used to go out and eat a lot. And then we would come back to Kentucky and Tennessee in it.
Yeah, we came
Visiting.
back. We were partners with another couple, friends of ours in Illinois, and we flew back to Albany, Kentucky, for him to meet my family, and mom gave them
Pickles.
couple of jars of pickles,
When we were leaving, we were going back with the pickles.
and then so we got back in the plane, went up there, and in Winchester, Kentucky, we stopped to refuel, and when we got out of the plane, we pull up the pump and get out of the plane and tell them to tab it off. And tab it means it's half full. And top it off means you fill it all the way full. So we got out and said, tab it. Well, we come back out and they had filled the tanks full. And we didn't want them full just because of weight, because it's 4 people and luggage. We didn't want them full, we wanted them half full. And so we looked at the runway, and it's a long runway. We thought, well, we can get off with the weight and then we'll burn the fuel off. We took off, and the trees weren't at the end of the runway. Some trees were on down the field from the runway, and we just barely cleared those trees. And so we were going along. I mean, the plane should be flying this way. We were going like this,
Just
the
barely
weight.
going up.
and got to think, well, we're too heavy. And her friend, she said, well, I'm not going to throw out my pickles.
I can still hear her saying that. I'm not putting my pickles out.
Well, I'm not going to throw out my pickles.
But we just barely made it up.
We need to
Oh,
fly down and take Granny for an airplane ride.
yeah.
I don't remember when, but one time, one of the trips I was down, I took Granny Flowers for an airplane ride. And I saw that picture the other night.
We
were
just
going
saw
through stuff,
that.
cleaning out, saw that picture in
It was in the paper.
Grandson makes grandmother's dreams come true. She got to fly. Huh? She was 80 something. I don't remember how old she was.
But she was in her 80s. So we've had some close calls in that airplane, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
How long did you have your houseboat?
We bought a houseboat in 2003 and worked on it for a year or two. And then we've sold it in 2015 and bought a cruiser. Wish we still had our houseboat.
Houseboat was a lot of fun. It was.
Houseboat was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And when we had it, we'd come home from work, and especially on Friday nights, stop by and get a pizza and a movie. That's when you had movie stores that you go by and pick up a VHS or a DVD, pick up a movie, go to the houseboat, and have pizza and a movie, pound of M&Ms, watch a movie.
This was before heart condition, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember when it was?
Yeah, I had my heart surgery in June, end of June,
What year?
2001. Now, I knew I had a problem like 2 or 3 years before that, and I was trying to correct it through medication and exercise, but it just kept getting worse. And that's when I had the computer store, and I could be in the back in my office, and if I had to go to the front, out to the sales room or to the cashier out there, I'd have to rest before I could go back to my office. I mean, that's like 60 feet. And I got to thinking that if I had to run up a 10-foot bank to save my life or to save someone else's life, I couldn't do it. And that's how bad my heart had got. And I just went to the doctor and told him, I said, I need something done. I can't live like this. And so he said, well, let's just test you. And so they did what they call a heart catheter, where they go through your groin and test it. And once he saw that, he wouldn't let me get out of bed. He said, you're on the verge of a massive heart attack. And so I didn't get out of bed until after I had a 6 bypass surgery.
Dad had died of
Yeah, my dad had died of a heart attack at 44. At that time, I'd outlived 44 quite a while, and I felt pretty good about that. I really did. I felt good when I passed the age of 44.
Well, they took you by ambulance onto the
Well,
hospital
they took me by ambulance on to the hospital, and I had surgery
the next morning.
But and they told me that I was going to wake up. I go into surgery at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they'd wake me up around 10:30, and explain to me what I'd have to do. I'd have to kind of cough to get the tube out of my lungs, and about 10:30, 11 o'clock, they came in and woke me up, made me cough to get the thing out of my lung, pull the air tube out of my lungs, woke up. And then Carol and Jean and Clara come into the room where I was at. It wasn't 10:30 in the morning. I mean, it was like
It's more like 11 at night.
The next day, or that night, 10:30, 11 o'clock that night, that I woke up. So I'd been asleep for about 18 hours.
It was the longest day of my life, and he doesn't remember any of it. He was out.
Yeah. But what happened was when I came out of surgery, in recovery, there was too much blood in the drain tubes coming out. They thought maybe something had come loose, so they took me back in for surgery and opened me up again and check it all out and get it all straightened out. But that's the reason I was out so long.
Jeannie, you want to talk about that a little bit?
No, it was horrible.
I know it was a lot serious than what he said.
It was touch and go. It was. And the doctor was wonderful because he would call me every hour and tell me what it was going to be. And then he took me into his office after the first one, and he said, he looks really gray. Don't be nervous when you go in. It looks really bad. And it did. It was awful. And then he said, we're keeping him under because we're not sure how things are going to be. And then in a little bit, he said they had to take him back. So it was a very long day. But
with the friends and family, friends from church, kept her company.
We had a whole waiting room. They brought in coolers of food, and everybody was saying, man, he must have a huge family. And Tish was pregnant, and I'm not sure where did they live, but she couldn't come. They wouldn't let her come, so she was scared to death, so I kept having to call her. So it was a long day, and the doctor was wonderful. When I first met him, he looked just like Doogie Howser on TV. He looked like he was 14.
That's right. The night before, he came in to talk to me before the surgery, and when he walked in the room, Jean looked at him. Have you done this before?
I guess he saw the look on my face. I mean, I was expecting an older doctor, and he looked like a kid.
Yeah, he said, yeah, I've done it before. I do about 2 or 3 a day, 5 days a week. But I was back at work doing just light stuff. Taking it pretty easy in about 2 weeks. And
it was amazing.
On the visit to my heart doctor, he said, it's amazing people who work for themselves are back at work in 2 weeks. people who work for companies, it takes them 3 months to get back to work. Like the heart, and then later on I had bladder surgery, had bladder cancer. You'd forgot that, hadn't you?
No, I was waiting. I was going to say.
You've been
Been through a lot. That's something else too. The first time I went and met his family, I guess I was in shock. My parents were quiet. My mom just hardly ever spoke, and when she did, she was real calm and quiet. And I went to David's family's and walked in the door, and it was so loud. And David's mom was just
Well, there's 7 kids.
7 kids, and it was so loud. Everybody was wonderful, but it was so different for me that I was almost in shock. And then he took me to ride a horse, which I wasn't used to riding a horse, and he put me on a wild horse. Everybody kept saying, "You let her ride that horse?" And I'm thinking, how could you do that to me?
Well, I've got pictures of you on that horse, and you look just as happy.
Oh, I was. It was a good time, but it was so different than what I was used to. But it was good. I loved Alberta, but she was so opposite from my mom. It was just like night and day, going back and forth between them. But I loved them both. They were wonderful. We still have David's mom's letters back and forth. There's a whole box of stuff that we found that you kind of forget about it, but we've moved it every time we've moved, and we've moved a lot.
Yeah, we found letters that, like she would write to us. Well, actually, we found one that Helen had written her.
Mm-hmm.
When Finus and Helen lived in
In
Ohio.
Indiana? Oh, I thought it
They
was.
lived in Ohio. Because remember, Uncle Finus and Helen lived in Ohio, and they bought that farm down there. And then Helen moved down with Gail and Gary and Bill, and she lived on the farm while he worked in Ohio, and he'd come home like once a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I remember he bought me a bicycle up in Ohio or wherever he was at, and brought me home a bicycle one time. And it was $18 that bicycle, and it took me 2 years to pay it off. Picking strawberries, doing whatever I could. Who's those people that lived across the road from us back there? I don't know if you remember them. Was it Sales? Was it Sales? Yeah. But she used to pay me $0.25 to crawl underneath her house to get eggs.
But we had tobacco and strawberries and cucumber. We had cucumber patches, and those things were horrible to pick the cucumbers. I had to wear gloves because I broke out. That's okay. We were in Minnesota, I think, and when we heard that my mom and dad had been in a car accident, and dad had died instantly, and then mom was real bad. So we came home. We drove 18 hours straight when Chris was 11 days old to come back to Salina. And they weren't sure she was going to make it, but she was in the hospital for weeks in ICU. But she came through, but that's when we decided to come back to Kentucky.
Well,
Right.
we come back to Tennessee.
Yeah, come back. Oh,
No, that's right. We did. That's when we moved to Kentucky.
that's when we
from
moved to
Minnesota.
Kentucky, so we would be closer to her because I knew she was going to have a really hard time with it. But she got okay, and she made it. She lived alone she was 62 then, and she was, I think, 86 when she died. So she lived alone for a long time, but she was content. She did okay. He worked at Oshkosh, the factory. He was ready to retire that year, but he had the car wreck and he never got to retire. But he was there 20-something years. He was there a long time. And my mom was a seamstress. Dad would bring stuff home from work where all these women would want dresses made, and she would sew. So
She made her wedding dress.
she made my wedding dress. She has sewed for so many people, and she didn't even have to have patterns. She could take your measurements and just draw it out. She drew it out on brown paper bags. She would make her patterns, and she made the bridesmaids' dresses and my dress. She
And they
made
were
men's
good, too.
suits. She was a perfectionist.
They were good too.
Yeah,
Jean put her wedding dress on. the
I
other night.
did. I still have it, and it
Right.
almost fit.
She had it on, and it had impressed me until she turned around. She did have a zip in the back.
Well, there wasn't a whole lot in the
No,
back,
but
so I
it
was
wasn't-
impressed. I didn't think I could even fit in it. But then I found one of her old dresses too, and I got in it, and it was way too little for me. So she was a tiny person too when she was young. But it's neat looking back at the old stuff. And I didn't even remember keeping that dress. I remember my grandpa, he was probably at least 6'5". He was just so tall and thin. And I sucked my thumb when I was little. And every time I would go to his house, he would say, "Have you quit sucking your thumb?" And I'd say, "Yes." And he would give me 50 cents. He'd give me 2 quarters. Every time. And he knew I hadn't quit sucking my thumb, but he gave me money every time. If I'd tell him yes, I'd quit sucking my thumb. But he was a sweetheart. I don't remember my grandmother. She passed when my dad was 5. So I don't remember her, but I remember Grandpa well. And my other set of parents, I only remember my grandmother. My grandfather wasn't around, but she was always sick and in bed, so I don't remember that much about my grandparents. Do you? Yours?
Oh, I remember my grandparents well. I don't know. The thing about Grandpa Hardin was he always liked to squirrel hunt, and you'd always go when you went and stayed overnight with him. You'd end up going hunting for something, squirrel or possum or groundhog or anything. I remember the first time he let me shoot his pistol, shoot a groundhog, where I'd never shot a gun before, but he showed me how to shoot the pistol. I remember Grandpa Flowers just barely. I remember being up there making molasses with. I remember when he had a mule that went around and around, and then later on he had a pickup truck that he would jack up, take the wheel and tire off, and put just the blank wheel on, and ran a belt from that back to the what do they call it, that squeeze the juice out. Instead of the mule walking around, this little belt made it, from the truck made it turn around and make molasses. But the thing about making molasses, I really remember standing down at the end where the foam was and dipping off the foam and eating it. But I also remember he was a blacksmith too. I remember being in the barn down there with him, and he would have me pulling the bellows. Of course, the bellows to him would be right here. He could just pump it like that. But to me, it was reaching up like that, and pulling the bellows to blow the air through the fire and heat it up. But that's the 2 things I remember about him, that and then him being sick. You know, the best memory I have about my dad was when I was real young, when we first moved over to the place we all grew up. And we were going over to Granny's to get a dog. You remember Ginger? To get Ginger. And here I'm reaching up here holding his hand. He's holding my hand, walking through the woods here. And I remember just how comfortable and how safe I felt holding his hand, him leading me through the woods. And we walked, well, we didn't have a car, or we didn't have a motor vehicle. And if you went anywhere, you either rode the mules, rode the wagon, or you walked. We spent most of the time walking the places we went. But like you say, Mom did all the discipline. And but I don't remember any time that she spanked me. I do remember both of them from Dad. But you know what? Every time we have get-togethers, family reunions, and I look around at all my brothers and sisters, and I look at my kids, I look at you, all your kids, and then their kids, and every time we do that, I think to myself, Mom and Dad would be proud. Because we all turned out pretty good, and our kids are turning out pretty good. So they would be proud.
I think everybody's close in your families too, and in mine. I think you get together a lot. You still do a lot together. I think that's great, because so many families don't get together anymore. You know, they never see their brothers and sisters. So it's neat how
friends,
you guys have felt.
We have friends
together.
say, "You have more family reunions than anybody I ever heard of."
Everybody talks about
Yeah, more
all our
family
get-togethers. Yeah.